Hello and welcome to my Runick Gishki Spright deck profile. It's been something that I've been thinking about doing for a while, and I couldn't really find the best way to do it. I tried recording it once and the volume got all kind of messed up. I found that this was pretty much the easiest way of doing it, and I think this kind of shows mostly what I think is like the most optimal stuff to play right now, even if I don't own it specifically. Even during the April ban list, I was really hoping that this deck wouldn't get touched. Most of the stuff here, like the 50 cards that you see here, have been pretty much staple for me for all of the summer and throughout the spring and like now leading into the winter basically. So I haven't really changed much about this deck. This is what I would basically call a fully functional Gishki deck that actually can compete with the current meta. I have been testing it, playing against all the Fiendsmith stuff, Whitewood's Runick, Centurion, Ubel, and all the other things, and I've been trying to gather my thoughts about everything, and yeah, I still think that this deck is really strong. I've been learning more about how it plays and how to best use it, so yeah, I'm gonna go over the whole thing. So I'm gonna start with the Gishki cards. So yeah, I play in this deck 2 Gishki Grimness. This is a level 2 monster that can special summon a Gishki monster from the deck. Level 2 plays they're super relevant in this deck, and it even just normal summoning Grimness, special summoning Abyss, and adding something like a Gishki Shadow, and then discarding this to add Necromere, it really is totally fine with the whole way that the deck interacts, because you are putting 2 level 2 monsters on the field, and then you're adding a ritual card, a ritual spell, or a ritual monster from your deck to your hand. But yeah, essentially the Gishki Grimness does represent a 1-card combo, and then the same can be said for Focused Aquamere, and then really the same can be said for Nimble Beaver and Sprite Starter. So you're playing 11 1-card combo enablers in the deck, and that can be a really powerful thing. So yeah, there is a couple of different combos. You can do a 1-card combo with Gishki Grimness that can end on 4 interruptions, and then if you add any other Gishki card that is not a Gishki Abyss or a Gishki Grimness, so that can be a Gishki Vision, you can have a Focused Aquamere in your hand, you can have a Gishki Shadow in your hand, a Neremonis, a Aquamere, even the Necromere. Those are the stipulations. You can go for a 2-card combo that lets you end on 7 interruptions. So the thing is that I detail a couple of these combos in my other video that I've posted called Gishki Combos, like Gishki Combo Explanation. So yeah, that's basically a couple of the most important things with Grimness, and the fact that it can be used as the entire ritual requirement, just like Vision and just like Shadow, that also comes up a lot too, and it's even like really important in certain combos. 3 Gishki Shadow. Notably, this card is level 4, and you do play 3 of it, and it is not a card that you would normal summon to add something. You would probably ask yourself, why play this if you're gonna have like a Gishki Shadow like just in your hand like this? Even if you're drawing into something like just a Neremonis like this, you would think that like, okay, that's a brick, right? Like that is absolutely just a brick. Wrong. The thing is, when you have this Neremonis in your hand, you're actually looking at 1/2 of the interruption that you will gain if you just go through with the rest of your Sprite combo on this turn. I'm going to show you this right now. So this is part of the thing with Gishki Shadow. Like this is the same thing can be said for Gishki Shadow. And now, just to prove my point, we're not going to go for a Gigantic Sprite. We are just going to go for a Melty of the Forest here. And I think you understand that if you're a Sprite player, that this is not the end board that you'll be ending on, but I'm just doing this to prove my point. What this means is that even though we don't have any Gishki cards, when the opponent does something, and I'm not saying that this is optimal to normal summon Sprite Red, I'm just trying to prove my point. The caddy will activate. You will get to add a Melfi Penny from deck to hand. Your Melfi of the Forest can activate. It can choose to negate this card. The most important thing is that your Penny is going to activate. You're going to be able to Synchro Summon into your Herald of the Arclight. You can negate like an interaction like this off the opponent. Now your Herald of the Arclight is going to activate, and you can add your Necromere from your deck to your hand because you have the Neremonis already. So what does this mean? As long as you get to your next turn, you can now tribute an opponent's monster, even though this is level 2 and this is level 10, doesn't matter. Tribute this, summon that, and guess what? You get to special summon any water monster from the graveyard, including a Melty Penny right here. And we didn't even try to go for any of the water monsters, and that includes the Nimbles, that includes our Gishkis, all this other stuff. We could have gone for so much more, but I just wanted to show you. That is what I wanted to explain with Gishki Shadow. Just having the Gishki Shadow in your hand means that you're set up for your ritual play on the following turn, as long as you follow through with the Melfi play and make him Herald of the Arclight. Once your Herald of the Arclight naturally goes to the graveyard off of negating something, you get to add stuff, which a normal Melfi Sprite deck doesn't get to do. So it's a really, really important interaction. It kind of puts a lot of hands where you draw it, or just a Neromantis, or just a Necromere in perspective, because you know that you're still going to be able to continue your plays. The most important Gishki card that you can add off your Gishki Abyss, if you don't have any of them, is going to be Gishki Shadow, because if you have even just 2 of these Gishki Shadows in your hand and a Nimble Beaver in your hand, this is a card that you can easily discard to add another card. You can just discard Shadow, add a Necromere, normal summon Beaver, special summon Angler, and then you can instantly just link away the Beaver and the Angler to make something like a Bujinki Ahashima. And that means that you can make a Bahamut Shark, and then that Bahamut Shark can then make Totally Awesome. And you can extrapolate this concept way further, and it is pretty much like one of the core parts of the 2-card Gishki combo that I show off in my other video. Along with our 3 Gishki Shadow, we're going to be playing 1 Gishki Vision, and the reason why we're only playing 1 Vision is because you're adding this card once, and then if you're going to reuse it, you're going to be doing that with your Herald of the Pure Light. Most of the time, if you're looking to add a ritual monster from your deck to your hand, you can have something like the Herald of the Arclight, or you can have something like the Focused Aquamirror help you out as well. Gishki Vision is a great card nonetheless. It is a level 2. Even if you choose to not discard it, just normal summoning this card means it's a level 2 monster, and you can extend your plays from there. It can help you extend your Sprite plays if you need to. That's kind of the thing with Gishki Vision and Gishki Shadow, is that you play alternate ratios of them, but this means that you're going to be able to see the cards just as much as you would normally need to. It's totally fine to have 1 Vision in the deck. You don't need more than that. I see lots of Gishki lists that pile on Gishki Vision, and it's like there are much more important cards to be playing in the deck than just Gishki Vision, because in this particular build, it's easy to just access your Neromantis. Just like 2 Gishki Grimness, we played 2 Gishki Abyss. Gishki Abyss specifically says that you have to search a Gishki monster with 1,000 or less defense. So that pretty much only includes Vision, Grimness, or Shadow. The main thing about Gishki Abyss is that this is a non-hard once per turn searcher for your Gishki cards. That is extremely valuable in this deck because there are easy 2-card combos available with Gishki Grimness and any of your Gishki monsters to put this card into the graveyard and then resummon it off of your Neromantis. This can help you set up some really, really powerful Link and XYZ plays that continuously get you more and more card advantage as long as you have more Gishki Shadows in the deck. The main thing about playing 2 of this card is that you don't want to play 1 and you don't want to play 3 because you don't want to see multiples of this card, but you also want to make sure that you can always summon another one out of the deck. Most of the time, you're going to be able to use your Gishki Grimness twice, maybe once during your first turn, and then again during like turn 3, after the play has rolled back to you. Just having this card or this card in your hand are both quite ideal play starters. I have not had any problems playing 2 Gishki Abyss or 2 Grimness. I think that these are both ideal ratios. So yeah, the 2 Gishki, if a Gishki Neromantis, this is really just like the payoff, like what are we doing with these Gishki monsters? We're actually going to use these to summon really powerful ritual monsters. This is a non-hard once per turn monster effect negation that also shuffles cards from anywhere back into the deck, and that also targets a water monster in the graveyard and lets you special summon it with no restrictions. This Neromantis card is really strong because once it's actually on the field and then it negates a card, it goes from the field back to your hand. So something like a Melfi Caddy turning into a Herald of the Arclight, that becomes even more valuable when you know that your ritual monster that's on the field is going to go back to your hand. It's one of the best cards that you could possibly be tributing an opponent's monster to summon with its own ritual spell, Necromere. It's just such a good payoff basically to everything. And one of the other main things is that in your 2-card Gishki combo that like lets you consistently go for Bujinki Ahashima and Bahamut Shark and Totally Awesome, it completely stops something like Nibiru in its tracks, because by the 4th or 5th summon this card is already out, and then you can negate this card and then they have to have something like an infinite impermanence basically as well to go along with it. You know, even that branded card that like when it goes to the graveyard, it lets you like pop something or lets you pop the whole field during the end phase. You can just easily negate that with your Neromantis after tributing it. You can just make it so that doesn't matter at all. Any kind of monster effect that you don't want is such a good card to be negating off of Neromantis. So yeah, that's all I'll really say about Neromantis and like the Gishki monsters. In terms of the Gishki spells, 3 Focused Aqua Mirror. This is a non-hard once per turn Rhoda for any Gishki monster in your deck. And during the end phase, you can also banish this card from your graveyard as long as you control a Gishki ritual monster. And then you can set an Aqua Mirror spell trap. You can set an Aqua Mirror spell trap directly from your deck or your graveyard to your field. And that can be really cool to just set up a little bit of follow-up in a Gishki Aqua Mirror. You could play something like Aqua Mirror Illusion. Aqua Mirror Illusion lets you special summon a Gishki ritual monster from your hand, cannot attack, and is returned to the hand during the end phase. Basically, this means that you could negate a card and then instantly just re-summon this card back to the field. I do think this card is pretty much win more. I would not want to draw this card as my 6th card. The thing with Necromir is that it is a really, really awesome way to take out the opponent's monsters. It is a really, really good discard target for your Hugin the Runick Wings, because you could just recycle it later off of just putting a Gishki monster to the top of your deck and then putting the Necromir itself to the bottom of the deck. So it's a really cool way that the card is able to recycle itself. You do have to pay 3,000 for this ritual spell, but it is still a really important ritual spell. And the only other thing that I'll say about Gishki Necromir is the fact that if you think about the Gishki side of the deck, this is going to be like the main way that Gishkis offer forms of removal in the deck. And it's basically like Sprite Smashers, because the Sprite side of the deck has Smashers that it can end on. That card is really, really good for dealing with like the opponent's cards and stuff like that. But then Necromir is also really good at dealing with the opponent's cards. And then the only other ritual spell that we play in this deck is Gishki Aqua Mirror. One of the most famous ritual spells, in my opinion, ever. It's next to like Advanced Ritual Art. It's one of the most standard styled ritual spells that also has a really, really good way of recycling itself. The fact that you can always recycle it, it's not once per turn. You're going to be hopefully taking the best advantage of it by tributing off a Gishki ritual monster in turn. Okay, so yeah, we'll just move on to the kind of like the Nimble Melfi engine, we'll say. So they had 3 Nimble Beaver and 2 Angler. They kind of like work in the background basically. Like you always know that your Sprite Sprint, that you take 2 monsters, you make a Sprite Sprint, and then those 2 monsters that you use to make the Sprite Sprint are going to replace themselves. And you can almost always count on that because of your Nimble Engine. And the Angler is such a good card to draw in this deck too, because anytime that you draw it with any of your runic spells, that means that you're almost always going to be able to like net some form of special summon from the deck using it. Starting a combo off with Beaver and then like going like Beaver, special summon Angler, and then go starter. Use those cards to go for Gigantic Sprite, use Gigantic Sprite to go for Gishki Grimness, which can then special summon Abyss. You're basically setting yourself up for so much spam potential with the Nimble Engine. The Nimble Beaver on its own represents a 1-card combo that can go into several layers of interaction. I basically take it for granted. In the current way that I look at the combos with this deck, with the current support for Gishkis, I would not play a Gishki engine without the Nimbles, because they help me access Totally Awesome by putting more bodies on the field, putting link points on the field, letting you go for Bujinki eventually. It's great for those sort of like Gishki specific combos, but it's also just great for setting up any of your Sprite plays as well. And I've talked about Melfi's kind of at length already, but yeah, you wouldn't really want to normal summon this and then link it off to make a Sprite Sprint or make a Gigantic Sprite, but in case I do have to do that, I'm going to make an effort to make Herald of Pure Light so that I can put whatever Melfi that I end up using like for like an initial play, like a Sprint or a Gigantic, and I'll put that back into the deck. You wouldn't want to continue your plays without the Melfis, because in almost every board you're making, 99.99% of the time, you're going to be making your Melfi engine, using those to go for your Herald of the Arclight. And I will say that the Melfi engine is so good at dealing with certain starters of certain decks, like notably against things like Tenpai and against things like Snake Eyes. It completely ruins them. The Melfi engine is so synergistic with the Gishki engine, just the fact that it works so well between Neromantis and Necromir. Then you have the Sprite engine that gets into your Caddy and your Melfis and your Herald of the Arclight. that can add you another ritual card. And that works perfectly with this. It's like the perfect, like, fundamentally easy playstyle that this deck can have access to that no other deck basically has. So we have the Sprite Engine. I play a pretty small Sprite Engine, but pretty much my whole philosophy behind this is that just having these like 5 Sprite monsters, just having Sprite Smashers, and just having 3 starter, it gives the Sprite Engine just enough dexterity that you're pretty much always going to be making use of it when you have access to it. Sprite Blue is a card that when it's special summoned, it lets you add any Sprite monster from your deck to your hand. Gishki Grimness lets you, when it's special summoned, lets you special summon any Gishki monster from the deck, and that becomes a Gishki Abyss. They're basically like the same card, in my opinion. If you start your plays off with a Sprite Blue and then go for Jet and then go for Gigantic, you can use Gigantic Sprite to go for Grimness and set up your Abyss and set up your Gishki Shadow in your hand, which we talked about that. Or the other way around, you could go Grimness, special summon Abyss, add Shadow, overlay, make Gigantic Sprite, and then from there you can use Gigantic to go for your blue and then go for your Jet and then go for your Carrot. That's kind of like the main thing with Sprite Blue, is that like if you already have your Grimness, then you can set up your blue, and then it works vice versa. If you already have your Sprite Engine, you can then go for your Gishki Engine after that, so it's really strong. Sprite Jet, like I've said, is pretty much very similar to Gishki Abyss because they both add key parts of your respective engines from your deck to your hand. If you already have something like a blue in your hand and then you have the Jet, then I would probably use the blue to go for Carrot and then use the Jet to add Smashers. But the main thing that I'm doing with my Sprite Engine is I'm setting up, in most cases, like 99.9% of the time, I'm setting up the Sprite Carrot so that I have the spell and trap card negation. Almost every time that I don't have a Sprite Carrot on board, I don't know what it is. I feel like the universe is just completely against me, but whenever I do not have Sprite Carrot on board, they will have Raigeki, they will have Heavy Storm, or they will have Evenly Matched. Setting up just the spell and trap card negation is just so key that in some cases I would never, like in most cases I would never set up a Sprite Red first. I would almost always set up Sprite Carrot because just being able to deal with something like Evenly Matched and stuff like that is so important. But the most important thing really, Sprite Carrot can deal with the opponent's follow-up after their initial plans fail because of the Melfi Engine, because of Sprite Sprint, because of like IP Masquerena that you're going to be making. When they actually activate like a spell card, like a fusion effect or something, like after the fact, then just negating that with Sprite Carrot can completely end their turn and make it so that they have to pass like to you and go to the end phase. So yeah, Sprite Carrot is so important. Sprite Red is not to be underestimated as well. After you've made Carrot, like most of the time the last monster that you're going to be summoning from the deck off of your Sprite starter or adding off of your Sprite Blue is going to be your Sprite Red. With Melfi of the Forest, basically it gives you that monster effect negation as long as they normal summon a card. So yeah, the next thing really is the Sprite starter. I do play 3 starter. The Carrot that you get off of your starter is going to be like the cherry on top. It makes it that you have a spell and trap card negation. After you make Herald the Arclight, following up with a starter, Summon Red is like so devastating. The Runick Engine. So the Runick Engine is something that like once I figured out that the deck is so synergistic with these level 2 cards, and it just sort of took me a minute to figure out that like the level 2 monsters with Gishkis work with the sprites, yes, but the level 2 cards of the Runicks also work with the sprites. So that should mean that the level 2 cards of the Runicks should also work with the level 2 cards of the Gishkis. The opponent may see 1, 2 engines and then say, oh, that's the entire deck. But then suddenly the third one comes out, the opponent is more or less most of the time going to be able to deal with 2 of your engines, but they're most of the time not going to be able to deal with all 3. So if you start with the Runick Engine and you're going for Hugin and you're discarding cards and they use things like Ash or Imperm to stop the Hugin so that you can't go for your Fountain, so that you can't draw cards because the opponent doesn't want to see you draw cards. And then if they don't deal with the Runick Engine, then it's going to let you draw cards. You're drawing cards and you're setting up interruptions, or you're setting up more monsters on the field that you could use to make XYZ Link or like XYZ Link or ritual plays basically. They really just cushion everything. It really makes it so much easier to play into opponents' boards and play around things, knowing that you have the Runicks and that you have ways of actually drawing cards, destroying spell and trap cards in the field, destroying monsters that are special summoned, negating monster effects, even letting you discard random cards from the opponent's turn, or just banishing cards. Like, just the banishing part alone about the Runicks is just such an awesome bonus. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. I play 17 Runick quick play spells in this deck, and then I also play the 2 fountains. So I'm playing 19 Runick cards total, and the way that I really see these Runick cards is they are my non-engine. I'm playing 17 non-engine in my deck. The non-engine in my deck is also ways for me to extend my plays. That is the way that I view the Runicks in this deck, and I have not looked back. And if I have to add any cards, then I basically use my side deck, and my side deck changes a lot. All these Runick cards are going to act as like a buffer against your opponent's interruptions. Like, they're not going to let you just willingly draw cards. So most of the time, the Ash Blossom is going to come down on things like the Hugin. What does that mean for you? It means that you can take any of your 2 level 2 monsters and suddenly make a gigantic sprite and you're off to the races. Or you could use these to make your sprint and then go for your beavers, and then you can use those beavers to go for a gigantic. I've been so happy with the way that this main deck actually all flows together, and I think you can see through some of these test hands that things are looking fine here. You can even see for like a 6 card hand that you're looking at Flashing Fire, 2 Runicks. You're looking at the Aquamirror plus like your Focus Aquamirror. You're looking at Sprite cards, Nimble cards. This main deck has been working so well for me. It has made like playing Yu-Gi-Oh over the last few months just so easy for me. This whole deck is like making Gishkis like an actual functional archetype. I'm just gonna quickly go over the extra deck. Starting with the Runicks, the 2 Hugin of the Runick Wings is super duper standard, and as well I'm also playing Gary. I do think that Sleipnir is kind of like a flex spot. You could replace this with like Varudris or like another Link monster if you really, or you could replace this with like Ninja Shadow Mosquito to go for some OTK plays and stuff, but I do think that Sleipnir here is actually pretty good. Gary and the Runick Hugin on the first turn, like they really open up like the most interaction, and they let you search for your fountain, and then they let you add the fountain back to your hand. And I think I would be really missing out on things if I didn't play the Gary. I'd be playing like a much worse version of the deck. For those who saw the extra deck without Sleipnir, I think that they would agree that this is probably the better thing to be including than something like the rank 10 Varudris, which I could only make under certain circumstances. This card can be made under a lot of different circumstances. These Runick cards can all turn into a Sleipnir, and suddenly that becomes a really important interruption. The Herald of the Arclight I've talked about at length. I think that the Herald of the Arclight is super important for this deck, and I would never trade it. Just the fact that this deck lets you add cards from your deck to your hand when this card negates a card, I think is so cool. I play the 1 Totally Awesome. As I've explained before, this card is super accessible off of Bujinki Ashima, having your Gishki Shadows in the graveyard or in the hand and stuff like that. This is like totally non-negotiable playing Bahamut and Toad. In my opinion, I do think Toad is a super necessary part of this deck. I do think you can play Mirror Mage and Swap Frog and stuff like that in this deck and play Toad. And I think you can easily try that and figure that out, because there are some situations which you already have your Sprite Engine, you already have your Gishki Engine, and then all you really need now is just like more interruption. Gigantic Sprite, just play the 1. You could play more than 1, but I think that would be kind of an inefficient use of your extra deck. You just got to make this at the right time. Like, you have to make sure that you're baiting your opponent's interruption and stuff like that. You could also use this to bait interruption and then go for something else later. Herald of Purelight is really important for like your kind of 2-card combo. It can also do things like let you recycle things like Melfi Engine, or it can also let you recycle other cards like Sprite Jet or like your Sprite Carrot. If they go to the graveyard, you could then like resummon them, and then off of the Jet you can add like Smashers or something. The Melfi of the Forest, I've kind of explained, is another key piece of interruption for the deck on the opponent's turn. Lets you negate an opponent's monster's effects and it makes it so that they can't attack. Lets you add your Melfi cards. The Appaloosa and your SP are going to be the 2 main cards that you're going to be going off of your IP Masquerena. It represents another way that the deck can deal with the opponent's monsters. SP Little Knight is really great because anytime I look at IP Masquerena on my field, I basically consider it 2 interactions. I can't really express how important these 2 are for the for IP Masquerena plays, because they are so good. Like, they both represent like important pieces of interruption. Bujinki, I've explained this at length. I also have like a combo video kind of showing how Ahashima is so important for Gishki combos. But yeah, it's like there's pretty much no other better way to summon your Bahamut Shark than using it. And then Sprite Sprint, like I said, any 2 level 2 monsters become a Sprite Sprint. Sprite Sprint then dumps an Angler. Those 2 level 2 monsters that you use to make Sprite Sprint replace themselves, so that means it's a +1. Now, the side deck honestly changes for me all the time, but I will say that evenly matched, Dark Ruler No More, and having the Mannequin Cat with the Chaos Hunter are all super standard at this point. You can play against Dimension Shifter like when they're actually banishing things, but having Mannequin Cat so that you can just access the Chaos Hunter from your deck and then like make it so that it turns off Dimension Shifter is so useful. I haven't actually used Arclord Christia in this way with Mannequin Cat, but I do think that it would be similarly really strong against something like Fiendsmith, which has a lot of light monsters and stuff. But yeah, I do think that I've kind of touched on pretty much everything. That is pretty much the extent of my Gishki Runick Sprite deck profile. Yeah, I'll just kind of show like this, like check this out. Like I could just activate this, special summon a Runick, special summon this, activate this, attribute this, add this, activate Fountain, activate Slumber, activate Fountain, put some cards back into the deck, and then instantly just draw 3 cards, and look at that, we are setting ourselves up for a 2-card Gishki combo involving Gishki Abyss, Shadow, and even having the Runick Hugin wings on the field. The whole point of this deck was to make it so that the Gishki cards were good cards, and that everything worked together. And I think I really cracked the code in terms of like how this deck works. Understand the relationship between the Gishki Ritual cards and the Melfi cards and the way that your Sprite deck interacts with those Melfis. I do think that that is a really great way to play the deck. It's a natural evolution to Melfi Sprite. And I'm really happy that I was able to talk about it like this in great detail. So yeah, if you like this video, just drop a like and leave a comment on the video. I've been working on this deck for so long, and if you like it, then that'd be awesome to see.